Ya Allah, Subhanallah, Ya Allah, Alhamdulillah, Ya Allah, La ilaha, Allahu Akbar, Ya Allah, Subhanallah, Ya Allah, Alhamdulillah, Ya Allah, La ilaha, Allahu Akbar.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu. You are welcome to today's Woman, the African Pride. My name is Hiba Farouk. With me in the studios is Mrs. Zakia Mohammed Sali. You're welcome to the show. One of my favorite guests, very frequent, very available for us when we need her. May Allah richly bless her. Today we're going to be talking about neighborhood. I'm sure a lot of people will be wondering, if you see it on your screen, why are they talking about neighborhood? Well, Islam has a lot to say about that, and so do we. So please sit tight, put your phone away, concentrate on us, because we have good things to tell you. All right. Mrs. Zakia, what is neighborhood?
Auzubillahi minash shaitanir rajim, bismillahir rahmanir rahim. So, neighborhood, as we've all grown up to understand, is considered as people that we live close to.
Right.
For instance, someone who is next door to us, or opposite us, or adjacent us in a localized geographical area, or in a community, our neighbors. That is the conceived meaning of what a neighborhood is. But then when it comes to the Islamic definition of neighborhood, it goes further to include other people. Islam goes further to explain what actually neighborhood is in the Holy Quran, chapter 4, verse 37. And I quote, and it reads and says that, "And worship Allah and associate not with him, and show kindness to parents and to kindred and orphans and the needy, and to the neighborhood that is a kinsman, and the neighbor that is a stranger, and the companion by your side, and the wayfarer, and those whom your right hand possess. Surely Allah loves not the proud and the boastful." So in this case, it is not limiting who a neighbor is to a geographical area or community, but then it is talking about a neighbor who is a kindred, a neighbor who is a kinsman. It is also talking about a neighbor who is a stranger. So even on your way to work or to school, or your way back from work, the person that you meet on the street who might say assalamu alaikum, or who might say good evening to you, and you respond back to the person, is a neighbor. A person that you are sitting beside in a bus is a neighbor. It also says that, and the companion by your side, and the wayfarer, and those whom your right hand possess. So a companion, as we mentioned, could be a friend. It could be someone, as I mentioned, that you have met on the bus. Probably you're going the same way, you attend the same school, you attend the same workplace. So all these people, when we put all these definitions together, a neighbor could be anyone, as long as you're around people. The people around you are your neighbors. The person that you live close by to in the house is a neighbor. The person that you work with in the office is a neighbor. Even the person, someone who is a stranger and might ask of help from you, is a neighbor. The person that you even sit beside on a chair in the park is also a neighbor. So anyone that you come into contact with can be described as a neighbor, but not necessarily those who live in the geographical area.
Right. Okay, so as Muslims, how do we differentiate ourselves within a neighborhood? Because, for instance, we live in a Christian-dominated, country where you find, we're essentially dotted, in our communities, and Islam encourages, congregation. It encourages that we come together as brothers or as Muslims. How can we differentiate ourselves from our neighborhood? And because there are certain practices that, doesn't sit well with, our religion.
Okay, so it's easy, because I've always said that Islam is the perfect and complete religion, because it makes provision for any sort of circumstance that we find ourselves in. So in the same way, in a neighborhood where it is predominantly a Christian neighborhood, and you're a Muslim who lives in that neighborhood, it is up to you. It is the way you carry yourself. It is the way you live by the dictates of the Holy Quran and the Sunnah and the Hadith of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So as a Muslim, for instance, let's say that I moved into a predominantly Christian neighborhood, and you know there's already this preconceived notion that Muslims are this way or that way, you know, and all of that. But then it is natural with every human being. Once you meet someone, although not knowing who the person is, there's
always a stereotype.
Yeah, a stereotype.
Yeah.
You know, you ascribe a certain sort of behavior to the person just by meeting or seeing the person. So in order to remove all these doubts, once you move into a community, it is your own acts, the way you carry yourself. It is up to you to let your neighbor or your neighbors know that, yes, I'm a Muslim, but then what I've heard about Muslims is not what I am. And that it is your duty to also show to them what Islam really teaches. An example is you can probably invite them to your home as a new member of the neighborhood, or you can go to them. You can go to them with gifts, introduce yourself, your family, and let them know that they are welcome to your home at any time. So you establish that rapport. That is the first thing that we have to do.
Right.
After that, just as I said, once in a while, you can invite them to your home for dinner. It is accepted in Islam, just to create that rapport and to gain that trust from them.
Right.
Apart from that, just as I said, you know, neighbors have rights, you know. They have rights over us. For instance, some of the rights are, they have the right to privacy. Right. You know, they have the rights to be loved as neighbors and cared for and all of that. So it is the way we exhibit these things to them. And an example is, you know, at the time of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Hazrat Bilal never met the Holy Prophet Muhammad even before accepting Islam. And this is because of the way the Holy Prophet carried himself. A lot of people have heard about this wonderful man with these wonderful qualities. He is kind, he is generous. So Hazrat Bilal heard about the Holy Prophet Muhammad from others, and then immediately was like, if there's such a man, then he might be a good man, and I would like to follow the religion that he's following. Right. So Hazrat Bilal joined, converted to Islam without even meeting the Holy Prophet Muhammad, just by the things that he had heard about him. Amr bin Yasin, who was also a slave, it was also the same thing with him. He also accepted Islam just by hearsay, things that the Holy Prophet had done. You know, and so it is the way we live by the dictates, by the things that we do. Islam says that we should be kind to and generous to our neighbors. It tells us that neighbors have rights over us. Even there's a hadith which says that when your neighbor is hungry, you know that your neighbor is hungry. It is not right for you to eat while the neighbor is hungry. So you demonstrate these rights. You live with a neighbor who you know is overstretched. Probably they cannot even afford 3 square meals a day. It is up to you as a Muslim to give to them. You know, we invite them during festive seasons to our homes. We give out gifts to them. You know, Islam says that. I mean, it encompasses a whole lot of things. So they are just these little acts that we have to engage in, you know, to differentiate ourselves from our non-Muslim neighborhood.
Talking about my next question, you sort of did touch into this part of how we associate with, you know, our non-Muslim. Could you throw more light on, you know, how to associate with our non-Muslim neighbors? Because I believe that there are certain activities that we could do in unison that wouldn't, you know, necessarily trump on our, you know, our religious, you know, differences.
The question is, how do we associate ourselves with our non-Muslim neighbors? Okay, you know, as human beings, we all have things that we, how do I put it? We have things that we agree on. You know, we have things that we in common that we believe in. Although we have differences. They are Christians, we are Muslims, maybe they are Buddhists, we are Muslims. But then there are certain things that we all agree with, we have in common. So as Muslims, you know, things that we can all do in common, like just as I mentioned, inviting them over for dinner, or probably there's a cleanup exercise in the neighborhood, coming together as neighbors and cleaning up the community. Maybe as Muslims, you can even go to their houses for dinner, but then they know, or you make them aware that, I'm just giving an example, that as Muslims, we don't eat pork. So in serving your meals, do not include anything that has pork in it. Or you have friends in neighborhood, you do things where you have maybe peer clubs, you have evergreen clubs. You have maybe cleanup clubs and all the, the social clubs. But then when it comes to certain club activities, like probably going out partying in skimpy clothes, in tight jeans and all of that, where drinking and other vices goes on, you don't associate with them in such activities. And because you keep up with the dictates of your religion, they even come to know that certain places Hiba doesn't go. Certain activities she doesn't involve herself in. So apart from the fact that Islam places great emphasis on good relationships with neighbors, things that Islamically are not accepted, then you don't do those things together. Just as I mentioned, other activities around the community like cleanup exercises, or maybe during Eid or their Christmas festive activities, you can engage with them. But where that activity goes against the dictates of Islam, then as a Muslim, you don't have to associate with such activities.
I appreciate that you said this, because a lot of Muslims shun from, associating in communal, activities with the non-Muslim, neighbors, considering certain things as haram. So, for example, receiving a gift from a Christian, they consider it haram because they do not celebrate Christmas. And vice versa, you have some Christians that wouldn't take meat that is usually distributed during Eid, because they feel like it is a sacrificial, meat. And then there are always these differences. So it's really encouraging that you mentioned, that people, non-Muslims and Muslims, can coexist. And, look at what works for them, and then they live in harmony. Do we have to indulge, or you sort of mentioned this, do we have to indulge in social activities to keep our neighborhood vibrant?
Yes, as a member of the neighborhood, just as I mentioned earlier on, as far as it doesn't contradict what your religion teaches, then why not? So a neighbor is a neighbor. You are each other's keeper. You look out for each other. So where there is happiness, it's right that you would take part in it. Probably a neighbor has given birth and there's an outdooring activity. Of course, she or she is your neighbor, and you're being invited to such an activity. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Or a neighbor's daughter is getting married, or the neighbor herself is getting married, and you're being invited to such an activity. There is nothing wrong with it. As a Muslim, you can indulge in such activities. The only thing is, whilst indulging in such activities, you have to bear in mind where you're coming from, your Muslim identity. Probably if you are part of the bridesmaid, and the bridesmaid are required to wear a certain sort of style to show to people that you are the bride's friend, or all of that. So, and as a Muslim, if the dresses are so exposing, they expose certain parts of your body, and then we all know in Islam that Muslim women are supposed to cover themselves. If it happens in such a situation, either you don't take part, or you don't become one of the bridegroom, or what you decide to wear would be your decision. You would decide to cover up the way a Muslim is supposed to cover up. Otherwise, you can be at the wedding, but then don't be amongst the bridegroom, because what they are wearing is against your religion. So yes, it all boils down to understanding each other, getting to learn about each other's religion. And just as I mentioned earlier on, it is about the way you portray yourself. So in certain activities, your neighbors might even know that, let me give you an example. I have a neighbor who sells poultry just opposite my house. One day, during Christmas, they gave us a gift. They brought a fowl. So my husband was like, "Oh, why? You have dressed one, so why don't you give us the we prefer the dressed one?" My dad was like, "No. I know that you Muslims, before you slaughter an animal, you have to recite a prayer before you do it. I know that, and so I don't want to offend you with that, and that is why I brought you the live chicken."
That was very thoughtful.
Yes, that was very thoughtful, and it's because of the relationship that we've had with them. So they know who we are. They know the things that we believe in. And so
and looked out for you.
Exactly. So it is about how we portray ourselves, sticking to what we believe in, and practicing it properly. Not that we take what suits us and practice, but then practicing what the religion tells us to do at every point in time. So that an activity whereby your neighbor knows this is an Islamic, they wouldn't even go to the extent of inviting you to it.
That's correct.
So yes, we can. Exactly. So just as I mentioned, community labor, social groups, anything at all that keeps the community vibrant, or maybe even party politics, within the community. You can indulge in it once it doesn't contradict your religion and the teachings that comes with it.
Okay. So getting to the ending of my questions, I've got this last one. Can it be a blessing or a problem? Can one person be a blessing or a problem in one's neighborhood?
Can one be a blessing or a problem in one's neighborhood?
No, we didn't want to use the exact opposite of a blessing.
Okay.
The word is a bit too harsh. But could you be a blessing or a problem? Could you be an asset or a liability to your neighborhood?
It's a two-way answer. Just as I said, it depends on you, the individual. As a neighbor, you know that. And I would give an example. Let me use some of our Muslim communities as an example. Just as you mentioned earlier on, we live in the country. We live in communities where our communities are not predominantly Islamic communities. So you would find yourself living amongst a community who are predominantly Christians, or maybe a small group of Muslims might be living in a community which is predominantly a Christian community. So we can be a blessing. Just as I said, our neighbors have rights, have their own rights. We owe them. We are responsible of their privacy. We need to give them the privacy that they need. And so, for instance, during Eid festival, sometimes you find that in some communities, people go out drumming, dancing, drinking, making merry, and sometimes you see long queues of traffic caused on our streets. We cause inconveniences in such cases. And funerals, outdoorings,
the roads.
The roads are blocked and all of that. These are we don't need to inconvenience our neighbors. We should rather be blessings to our neighbors. So any of such acts that would inconvenience our neighbors is causing problems in our neighborhood. Or an example is during Ramadan. In some Muslim communities, they use what do you call these?
The
microphones. They use microphones to call the azan. And even that is not really a problem because it is just for a few minutes that people are called to prayer. But then you find that in the Taraweeh prayer, imams still use microphones, and they recite for long periods, and they recite it out loudly, forgetting that neighbors are around. And look at the time that Taraweeh is being said. People might be sleeping, or they might want their quiet or privacy in a certain way. So some of these things are things that we need to look out for, so that we do not destroy the blessing that comes with being good to our neighbors, and the blessing that comes with giving our neighbors the rights that they deserve. And also, Islam preaches cleanliness, and it says that cleanliness is next to godliness. But then sometimes in our communities, we find that, Muslims use a lot of water because of this cleanliness injunction, should I call it? Yes. We use a lot of water. And in some communities, you find people using water in ways that are very, that might inconvenience some people who do not really understand what we are doing. So as much as possible, especially in cases where you have public facilities, it is not you, the family, solely using that facility. You have other people who are not Muslim using that facility. You go to use a water closet. You wash yourself, and then there's water scattered on the seat and all of that. You do the proper thing and wipe it, because you know the next person probably is not a Muslim. Even if the next person is a Muslim, we need to bear in mind that it stresses on cleanliness. If you don't wipe out that water, it might cause an infection or an inconvenience, because you expect someone to come in and use tissue to clean your mess. I mean, that is wrong. So these are some of the things that we should be mindful of. Remember, I said that a neighborhood, it could even be someone in your office. So it's the same way as Muslims. Everywhere we go to, we need to portray that we are Muslims. Even in the office, with regards to this water issue, you still make sure that you wipe after using.
Talking about the workplace, a Muslim might want to, perform the daily prayer, and sometimes they're not considerate about the non-Muslims there. So not only do they, do it very loudly, they do it in very compromising location, that the entire public uses. And it's very important to say your prayer, but it should be able to be convenient for you to be able to concentrate in your prayer, and then convenient for those who aren't saying prayer. So in a respectable way, not in a way that it infringes on somebody's rights to movement or anything. And even in public transportation, you can say a nice silent, prayer with your fellow Muslims, during flights, in long journeys by road, you can do all of that in a very nice, respectable, way, without, bothering the person sitting, next to you. So yes, you can't be a Muslim efficiently and still do it in a very respectable way where you do not affect the neighbor that isn't a Muslim. This has been a very beautiful topic. It's a very beautiful topic. It's not something that is talked about much, and so I appreciate it, especially with the azan. I believe that in terms of the azan, if Islam has been accepted into this country, they know that's part of Islam, and a key part of Islam is a call to prayer.
Yes,
this is an announcement.
So that is acceptable in a way, because it is not overstretched, because everybody knows that at a certain point in time, the azan is going to be said. And even people who are non-Muslims have adopted to it. They use the Islamic call for prayer as a determinant of time, because they know when it's Fajr, they hear the azan being called, they know it's 5:30, and they wake up. So it's something that they have come to accept. But then, just as I was saying, in the case of the Taraweeh, where the microphone is used for long hours in recitation, and sometimes even used for zikr loudly, it causes some sort of inconvenience to our neighborhood. And these are the things that we need to watch out for.
That's true. So as much as possible, let's be a blessing to our neighbor. Our neighbors are very important to us, because if anything is happening in the neighborhood, like Sister Zakia rightfully said, it doesn't necessarily have to be the community where you live. It could be at the workplace. It could be on your way to work, on your way back, just anywhere you find people. You try as much as possible to be respectable to the person sitting next to you, regardless of if they're Muslims or not. It is simple courtesy, and it comes with blessings, as well. So it is very important that and as a matter of fact, it is a good PR for our religion. It's good PR for our religion. So as much as possible, represent Islam properly wherever you are, and do all of us, some good. Sister Zakia, before we finish, do you have any advice for my viewers before we wrap up the show?
I think we've said We've said a lot, but then I would just like to conclude with a Quranic quotation, which I just found scrolling through my documents on the rights that we owe our neighbors. And it says that one who believes in Allah and the day of judgment must not cause hardship and inconvenience to his neighbor. And he who believes in Allah and the day of judgment must respect his guests. And he who believes in Allah and the day of judgment must speak well or keep quiet.
Right.
So this verse is emphasizing our responsibilities towards our neighbors, that we do not have to cause them any hardship, or we do not need to inconvenience them in any way. And remember, I said earlier on that Islam is a perfect and is the final religion, because it has taught us how to live peacefully with people who are not part of us. And by part of us, I mean people who do not believe in the things that we believe in. It teaches us how to coexist. We can coexist peacefully, even with the differences that we have.
Right.
There can still be peaceful coexistence. And in the verses that I have mentioned, and then even this last one that I read out, which talks about respect for our guests and all of that. We know that our neighbors, no matter who we are, Islam behoves that we respect them, and that as Muslims we need to work with to exhibit the tenets of Islam. If we're able to abide by all these teachings, then we'll be fine. We wouldn't have any issues at all. It is only when we do not abide by what the Quran tells us to do, that is when we have issues here and there with people misunderstanding us, people having preconceived perceptions about Islam, which mostly aren't true. Right. So it is our duty as Muslims to try as much as possible to behave in such a way that would portray what Islam truly and really means.
This is very, very elaborately, put. Behaving yourself essentially is tabligh, and you know the blessings that comes with tabligh. It has been today's woman, the African Pride. This is for the contemporary African Muslim woman, and any and everybody, be you Muslim, be you Christian, be you anyone, as long as you breathe and see and can hear us, this is for you, and I hope you learned a thing or two. My name is Hiba Farouk. I've been doing this with Mrs. Zakia Mohammed Sali. We're very appreciative of you coming to the show. She's very faithful to us, very faithful to today's woman. Thank you so much for watching. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
And there is no God beside him, the knower of the unseen and the seen. He is the gracious and the merciful God. Oh Allah, you are most great. He is Allah, and there is no God beside him, the knower of the unseen and the seen. He is the gracious and the merciful God. Oh Allah, you are most great. Oh Allah, you are holy. Oh Allah, we praise you. Oh Allah, there is no God, you are most great. Oh Allah.